No, no.
Hi. Oh. All right, we'll call this special meeting of the General Government and Finance Committee to order at 5:34 p.m. This meeting has been given public notice in accordance with Section 19.83 and 19.84 Wisconsin statutes in such form that will apprise the general public and news media of subject matter that is intended for consideration and action. Roll call shows all members present. And with that, we will move on to citizen input. If anybody would like to speak primarily on these topics, please come to the podium and please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Okay, Melanie Smythe, can you hear me? No, you can't. Melanie Smythe, N140 W7938 Cedar Lane. Okay, I've been thinking a lot about the last 8 weeks and what's coming up in the next 8 weeks. And I think there's a clear indicator with our election that part of the reason for a change in the president is because of the activity around the village center project that's at Pilgrim and Mequon. The other thing that seems to be clear to me is that a stepping back period to take a look at what constitutes the actual village center on a more holistic basis is probably a good idea. Now that's different than the task that you have right now, which is to deal with this property situation that we have, because the clock is ticking on that. What is not clear is that a TID will pass. I don't think that it will, or it has a good chance of not passing. I also think that we need to look into alternatives to funding. Should the TID not pass, do we actually want to have general obligation bonds only as the way to fund the properties? Obviously, some of the bond is for business, the normal business of the village, but I'm talking specifically about the $10 million. I think that we should postpone this vote in order to look a little bit further into what some other alternatives may be. It's a big decision. It's a lot of money, $10 million on top of the $4 million, which is normal business. And that may allow us to step back and do some further digging into possible funding. Perhaps Mr. Cosson has some ideas on that tonight. I do think that we could possibly postpone the closing of the Ascension property. Usually, if everyone mutually agrees to that, that's 8 weeks away. So you do have a little bit of time before that closes. And just as a comparison, you took extra time to look at the $39 million or $39,000 upgrade for Microsoft. I think we should definitely take a little bit more time to look into this $10 million that could potentially affect taxes, whether or not there's a TID, and various other things for the next 20 years. Those are my comments. Thanks.
All right, thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else wishing to speak for citizen input?
I couldn't find the yellow sheet. All important of it. Good evening, Scott. Scott Ifley, W159 N10514 Old Farm Road. No direct comment, just some questions, and I don't have to be answered here. I just kind of like to know. I'm familiar with most of the items on the capital borrowing because the village board is, it looks like, I think, has already taken action and said, yes, we're going to do it when we get to capital borrowing. But I'm a little confused about, it looked like some of these were potentially parking lot items like we used to do, where you split out the parking lot items for about $3.5 million a year. And then we had a separate discussion. We've never had that discussion this spring. So I don't know if this is lumped in with that or not. I'm not exactly sure. It would seem to be pretty late for us to be doing parking lot items. We usually did that in February or March. So not sure if that's together. Maybe somebody could clarify that for me. And I didn't really see anything in that list that I wasn't, that wasn't out of the norm for me, other than 2 items, 1.56 million for a road program. I don't know if that's for Division Road or that just roads in general. As everybody up there knows, and I know and a lot of people know, we get about 1.2 to 1.3 million from the state every year to do road repairs. I believe it comes from the gas tax. So is the extra 1.56 million for projects that we said we were going to do, or is it for Division Road? Because with Division Road, we still don't have right-of-way access. It's unclear how quickly the project actually is going to go through. So that may be left off for next year, but hopefully someone can clarify that. Also, the $500,000 figure in there for public safety. I don't know why that's in there because we don't have a site picked out. We're getting a presentation later tonight, but there's no site. We're having discussion, but I don't know what the 500,000 is for. That sounds like a lot of money to be borrowing for 10 or 20 years. Again, I don't know if these are 10-year notes or 20-year bonds. I didn't get a lot of time to look at it, unfortunately. The last 2 items are $375,000 or $355,000 for planning fees for TID 10. We don't have a TID 10 yet, so is that pre-work or something for $355,000? Maybe Phil can fill us in on that, because we don't know if we're having a TID. Is that a lost cost if we authorize that and then we don't have a TID? Are we going to be paying on those bonds for 10 years? I mean, I don't know. And then the only question, okay, final question. It looks like we're looking to pay back the general fund for 1.175 million for the Grosnick purchase. We've carried that on our books. I understand it came out of the general fund when the purchase was made. Why are we reimbursing it now? Obviously, we carried it on there until we really know what we're doing with the property. If we're going to sell it to a developer for money, I don't know that we need to throw that on a long-term bond. We've carried it on our books for 18 months, and it doesn't seem to have hurt us at this point. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Is there anyone else here for public comment? All right, if not, we will move on to new business item A, resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of not to exceed $9,980,000 taxable general obligation promissory notes, Series 2025A. And with more information is Phil Cosson from Ehlers.
Thank you. Good evening. Phil Costin with Ehlers. You want me here or up there? Either?
Whatever's easier for you, Phil.
Is it easier up if I'm up there so you can see?
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
for me, Mr. Hunt. You're a nice guy, but I can't see through you.
That's probably good. All right, well, I hope to have can you hear it? Is that on?
These things are,
It's broadcasting. It might not be that loud in here, but it's broadcast.
Okay, all right.
okay.
Hope to have some of the answers that were raised in the public comment. I don't know if I have all the answers because I'm not that familiar with
Right.
all the projects that were referenced earlier, but what I'd like to do is instead of just walking through a bunch of numbers, I wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit for your 25 financing plan. And there are two different issues that we're talking about, a taxable and a tax exempt, and I'll talk about that. Also, I referenced in here TID 10 update. Obviously, we don't have a TID 10. So it's really a village center update as to where we are. We did have a good chance. I had a good chance to meet with the new village president and staff to kind of talk through the status of that project. And from that discussion, was able to kind of put together a couple of options for your consideration. I don't think there's any action tonight on that, but rather it's more just an update as to where we stand. So I'll touch on that first since there's not as much to it. So there are, as I think everybody's aware, TID 10 for any tax increment districts that are going to be created. And again, we don't have a TID 10 at this point. There are 3 approvals needed. Plan Commission 2 weeks ago did approve a resolution forwarding it on to the village board. So if the village board wants to take this up, you have a few actions that you could take. And then if it's approved at village board, then it'll go back to the joint review board, which is the other taxing bodies for final vote. So the options that we have laid out were again discussed with the new village president and staff. And I think there's really 4 options that we really looked at. One option is really to delay action to seek additional input from the community and from developers. And the reason for that is really twofold. One, I think there's a desire to see lower density if this does develop. And I know later on your agenda tonight, there's also a discussion about multifamily as a broader discussion point as well. And that may play into what actually gets developed, if anything, out there. And then the second is really, to take a fresher look at the mix of residential that would occur out there. So it's really a combination to get more input from the community. And also, I think it likely probably good to reach out to a few developers to get some input from them to what is truly marketable out there as far as what kind of density they would need to make this work as well. So one is just delay action. I think the village president, I don't want to speak for you, village president, but I know he's would like to see this slow down and seek more input as well. The second is that approve the project plan that was presented to Plan Commission on March 31st and April 14th. That was the resolution and the project plan that was approved by Plan Commission. So the village board has the option, once this is put on the agenda, to approve the project plan, the boundaries as is. So that's the second option. The third option is the board could approve the project plan, but make modifications to it. That could be boundary and or projects. You've gone through the process, you've sought public input through the Plan Commission. The village board has every right to make changes to the project plan as part of your action. So you could, at a later date, once it's on the agenda, I'm just throwing it out there as an example. You could say, we're going to approve the project plan, but we're going to remove all the parcels north of Mequon Road, as an example. You know, that's the kind of approval you can make on the spot, as long as you have unanimous support from the board. And then the last is you could just deny approval of the tax increment district that's being proposed. So you really have those four options: delay action, approve it as is, make modifications to it, or just deny it. So those are the four options. Again, it's not on your agenda for tonight, but after meeting with the village president and staff, we wanted to make sure you're aware of the options going forward that are available to you for the village center area. Any questions on that before I leave that topic? Nope. Okay. So 2025 financing, and try to put this in a more of a summary format so that a little more understandable for people what we're doing. So 2025, and I have the A and B kind of flipped here. I know we have in the notice it says 25. A is the taxable. This is just illustrative. So the 25 general obligation note series 2025A really does finance 3.8 million in 2025 budgeted capital and equipment expenses. And we've provided the list that was referenced earlier as to what makes up those projects. And I'll show you that in a little bit. As it pertains to the general obligation note that is tax exempt, that note is scheduled to be a 10-year financing. So that was one of the questions that came up, was this would be a 10-year note, as has been the customary practice of the village in the past. So your normal capital expenses, roads, equipment, parks, all those kind of things, you have typically borrowed over a 10-year period, and that's what's being proposed here. It also does finance $365,000 in what I'll call planning expenses for various time spent by consultants regarding the Village Center project. Now, the couple of options there, we've included it because it was part of your capital list that was provided to us by the village. You could, if the district doesn't get created, it would become a cost of the village as opposed to the tax increment district. And then you can make a decision whether or not you think that should be just taken out of general fund as kind of a loss, kind of a sunk cost, or it could be borrowed as we're talking about here. And the reason we're borrowing it is so that we don't keep tapping into that reserve fund, but rather make sure we have a substantial amount of reserve fund, which ties back to your rating report. So we'll talk about that in a little more detail. But again, 10-year amortization with level principal and interest payments, except for the first year. And I'll show you a schedule why we did that. We want to kind of level out the principal and interest payments so we don't have a big spike in the debt service levy. And then we have a 3-year delay in principal on the TID 10 portion. And that's because you're borrowing the money in 25. You'll have payments starting at 26, and nothing's going to happen in the village center for a period of time. So you're not going to generate revenue. So we're trying to match up the revenues and the expenses, the expense being the debt service on the TID, on the village center costs. And so we've delayed principal on that for a few years to make that work. So that's the first financing. As it pertains to parking lots and the road project that was identified, I don't have that answer for you. I don't have that level of detail as to what exactly it refers to. The second issue is a taxable general obligation note, Series 2025, in your Resolution A. And again, as was indicated, this finances about 8.8 million in what would be eligible TID expenses if a TID is created, to include but not limited to land acquisition, demolition at the flower source, and some related professional services costs. And also, again, the Grossnick parcel that was referenced earlier. 20-year amortization is what's being proposed, again, to kind of match what could be the life of a district if one is created, a TIF district if one is created. And again, our goal here is to make sure that we're matching revenues and expenses if development occurs out there. I forgot to mention taxable and tax exempt, why we're breaking these out. Tax exempt is exempt from federal tax, and it has to be for projects that are public purpose. So if you think about equipment, that the general public benefits from that, roads, parks, those kind of things that have a public purpose. Why we've broken out and made the Grossnick parcels and the land acquisition in the village center is taxable is because there's potential benefiting a developer or a private entity. It also, by making it taxable, allows you and gives you the flexibility to be able to sell the land if you choose to sell the land to a developer. If we make it tax exempt, then you have to provide it for $1 to whoever buys it, and we didn't really want that for either the Grossnick parcel or for the village center parcel. So making it taxable gives you that flexibility to sell the land to an ultimate end user, that's the break between taxable and tax exempt. Again, tax exempt being public purpose, taxable being more private purpose, and that's why we have the breakout. We have a list of the parcels or the projects that were provided by the village. I understand it's relatively hard to read. All the different costs that have been identified in here, but you can see in the middle of this, you'll see where it says whether or not it's going to be taxable or tax exempt. We did share this list with Tom Griggs Law, to make sure that he's comfortable with providing a tax exempt opinion for all the projects that have been identified as tax exempt. So we have shared this list with him at this point already, so he was able to prepare the resolutions. He did come back with a few questions, for instance, the Grossnick parcel, and he wanted to better understand what those were and why they were purchased.
Who did you share that with?
With Tom Griggs. Griggs Law is the village's a bond attorney. And
Okay,
they provide the bond opinion as to whether or not it would be exempt from tax. So we did share that list with them. So some key financial assumptions, as typical, we try to be relatively conservative. One area that we also look at is growth. What's happening from a growth perspective in the village? The village has averaged about 6.48% growth over the last 5 years. In talking through this with staff and talking through with the village president, we wanted to scale that way back and not overstate what we think growth could be in the village. So for economic growth, which is just value growth from year in and year out of existing property, which has been, again, 6.48, we're using 25% of that going forward. So only 1.62% over the net going forward. So we're really dialing that back. And then the second is the net new construction that's occurred in the village has averaged 2.38%. We've taken half of that. So 1.19% is what we've used. So again, from growth perspective, we've really dialed that back to be very conservative. Interest rates, a little bit more of a challenge these days to kind of come up with a scale. We sell general obligation notes on a weekly basis. We really monitor what's happening in the bond market. It's stabilized quite a bit, the bond market, over the last 2 to 3 weeks. And we have taken recent similar credits communities that have sold that have a similar credit profile as the village. And we've added 40 basis points to that, and that's what we've used in our models. So we think we've been conservative in both of those approaches as part of our analysis. So the next page is really just that growth factor that I had talked about. This is really the chart that kind of feeds into the overall finance plan. So you can see that we're about 2.5% growth going forward each year. Again, as I mentioned, the tax exempt issue a 10-year note. So this shows that we have broken out the portion that would be levied and the portion that could be paid for if there's a new district created, that 360,000 roughly identified. And we have a separate schedule for both of those so that when it comes to budget time and identifying how much needs to be levied for, Matthew has the right information available. So this is the schedule we've used for the tax exempt. On the taxable, again, we identified 20 years. And we have delayed payments for a couple of years, as I referenced earlier, to kind of match up anticipated revenue of a new district with the expenses being the debt service. So that's what we've used, and we have a scale in here, scale being the interest rates that we have used based on a recent, in this case, we used the AA scale plus 40 basis points again to get to a pretty conservative number. Our goal always when we do any financing is to make sure that we clearly demonstrate what the tax impact is of doing capital borrowings. And so the village's debt service levy is remaining constant from 26 until 26 and then starts to drop off, allowing again to absorb some new debt and not see big spikes. So table 7 assumes that the TID 10, again, the village center area, is created and generates sufficient increment to meet to meet their obligations. And then we have a separate table 8, which shows no district being created and what the impact is. So we wanted to show it both ways, with and without a tax increment district, so that you can see what the true impact is if you have to absorb these costs as part of your general fund levy, as opposed to through a new district being created. We also identified in here on table 9 the borrowing capacity of the village. It'll be including these issues. You'll be at 43% of the borrowing capacity. Currently, you're at 37% of your borrowing capacity. So as a highly rated community, this is one factor that Moody's will take a look at, just to make sure that you're not exceeding what their expectations would be for a community your size. And we tend to say, you want to make sure at a minimum you're retaining 25% of your borrowing capacity. For a highly rated community, probably a third of your borrowing capacity, and you're well below those numbers at this point. So we have schedules that we have produced that ties in those assumptions that I talked about earlier, ties in the conservative growth estimates and interest rates with these capital borrowings. And I know there's a lot of numbers to look at on this page, but if you look at the third column from the left, you'll see where it says total tax rate for debt service. This is with a new tax increment district being created in the village center. You can see in 2025, your tax rate for debt service is $1.24. And even with these issues, it's drops to $1.22 projected in 26 and then drops off. So there is capacity to be able to absorb these issues without seeing a spike in your tax rate. And again, this includes the Grossnick parcel being part of this borrowing as well. The tax impact without a new district is shown. The numbers are really all the same as the previous page. We just don't have another source to pay roughly $9 million of costs. And I referenced this back at your meeting 2 weeks ago, or Plan Commission meeting 2 weeks ago. There was a question about if we don't create a district, what is the true impact of buying these properties. Now, what I have not factored in here are a few factors. One, I'm assuming you would sell land at some point if you didn't create the district to a developer or developers. So I didn't factor that in because I don't know what purchase price there could be and what you could sell it for. So if you look at this over a 20-year debt issue on a average home price in the village of $415,209, it equates to about $1,261. So that's the impact over a 20-year period to the average homeowner if these projects are all borrowed and you finance it over the lives that we're talking about to kind of get to a number that hopefully makes some sense for people and put it in some context around what you're actually looking at from an impact. And really what we're doing here is just peeling away the other revenue source being a potential TID and saying it's all got to be absorbed as part of your debt levy. And that's what we're showing here. And the second last page is really that bond chart showing your borrowing capacity that I just referenced earlier and shows the remaining capacity. So even with these debt issues taking on these debt issues, you have in the ballpark of $200 million of remaining borrowing capacity that you can take on. Finally, financing timeline, assuming that both resolutions get approved tonight, what we're asking of the village board is to authorize parameter resolutions. And a parameters resolution is a little bit different than the normal cycle we've done with you, where we've actually picked a specific village board meeting date and sold notes earlier that day, and then it came with the results. And the reason we're looking at parameters is really twofold. One is most every community sells on Mondays and Tuesdays. And so we'd like to get off on Monday and Tuesday so you're competing with less issues. But more importantly, and you can understand given what's going on in the market over the last month, is that it allows us to better manage market movement. So I had a couple of sales, general obligation note sales that were going to sell 2 to 3 weeks ago. We had to pull those. And we had to pull them because the bond market every day was just moving everywhere. And we sold them. We pulled those 3 weeks ago and we sold them last week as the market settled down. This gives us the flexibility to be able to do that, is to just say, okay, the market's crazy. We're not going to sell on a bad day for the village. Let's wait and delay until the market settles down and then we're going to sell. So it gives us that ability to better time the market, not time it from a rate perspective. It just eliminates some of the fluctuations we've been seeing and picking a better date. If they are approved tonight, we're projecting to sell on June 3rd. It could move to the 4th or 5th, but that's kind of tentatively what we've identified. And then that would allow us to close on June 26th in time for the purchase, which has to occur by July 1st as it's scheduled right now, by July 1st for the Ascension property. So this kind of fits within the timeline that's been identified and negotiated at this point. So with that, I'd be happy to answer questions you have. Again, I don't have a lot of detail on a couple of the projects that were referenced earlier.
Before we go into questions, we have 2 agenda items, and this presentation from Ellers was about both agenda items. So right now we are on the first bond issuance of the $9.98 million general obligation Series 2025A, and that's the taxable ones, right?
That's correct.
That's for the land purchases.
That's correct.
All right, so let's concentrate our questions on that particular item. With that, I would like a motion though before we start.
What are we trying to do? I thought it
No,
was
this is an
discussion.
action. This is,
Motion to approve is presented.
do we have a second?
Yeah.
I'll second. All right, we have a motion to approve. Discussion. Trustee Jan Miller.
On these taxable promissory notes, general obligation. Let's talk about this. Wouldn't we talk about what we decide to do? Because on page 1, and this is a question, options available to the village board. Are we going to address these? Because we can delay action, or we can deny approval of TID.
Even though they're, well, I'll weigh in, even though they're unrelated, even though they're related, because some of the acquisition property would be for the village center. This, I feel TID 10 or the potential TID is a separate action. That's gonna have to be decided another time.
This is just on the borrowing.
This is just a
Just on the
borrow,
borrowing,
nothing to
right.
do with
Just
tax,
to
the new taxing committee.
Give him the authorization to go out for borrowing.
Does the fact that we would or would not proceed with a TID affect any of this borrowing then? You've
No, I
got,
think these are obligations that are established and in place at the moment for the village.
okay, really?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
What about the $355,000? Those are for, I thought it was for your, setting this up. So what does it include?
That's on the next borrowing.
that's
That's
on
the
the next.
non-taxable. So I'd be happy
Okay.
to answer that once we get to the non-taxable.
Okay. So just on the taxable,
The taxable
Why are-
portion is essentially just the purchasing of the properties.
why, if we bought the Grosnick property for 1.170 million, why are we including it in here for the borrowing?
I'll turn it over to Matthew
Yep.
for that.
So I can take onto that, or I can take that one on. The reason we included it in this 2025 issuance is based on, I think the village board's understanding and my understanding, it was never the intention of the village to eat that cost for the purchase of the property. What we're doing here is we're reimbursing ourselves in the general fund for that purchase. The reason it's taxable is, the village hasn't decided what they want to do with the land yet, whether it be, sell it to somebody else or keep it. So that's the reason we included it on this bond issuance. If the village board, wanted to hang on and wait to see what we want to do with the property before borrowing it, that's certainly an option. But we're trying to make, the general fund whole with that with that $1 million loss that it currently has.
And are we saying these are 10-year?
These are 20-year. The taxable is 20-year, which again would tie back to the life of a potential new district. And even if it's not, it allows you to, if you don't create a district out there and this becomes a cost of the village, it allows us to spread it out over a longer time to mitigate some of the impact.
Do we have currently any 20-year?
The only 20-year we have is we have a 20-year bond, which we use for the DPW building.
We haven't TIDs though.
You've gone out longer on TID 10 or TID 8, I believe.
That was before my time. I can double
Yeah.
check on
TID
what
8, I
that.
believe we went out longer on that debt issue as well. Again, to match the revenues with the anticipated revenues and the expenses.
Okay. And so we're using 20-year bonds for this?
Notes, 20-year notes. but
Notes.
Yes.
And what did you say about the 355,000? That's in the next one.
That's
In the next
that's-
Right.
agenda item.
And so you're saying that we're going to the assumption. What is the bond market now? You said you waited for another municipality couple weeks to calm down. Is it still volatile?
No, it's really calmed down the last 2 to 3 weeks. It's been very stable. Unfortunately, it's kind of stabilized at a little higher rate than what it was 3, 4 weeks ago. But, you know, I would speculate, just pure speculation at this point, for the 10-year note, the tax exempt note, it'd probably be in the 350 to 375 range today. And on the taxable 20-year, probably closer to 5.5%.
Yeah, that was part of our
Yeah.
packet.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
But I don't want Scott to hold me to that.
I cannot speak for Scott. So we had asked for a couple different ideas on how to cover these costs. Is this the only one that we're looking at?
As it relates to the purchase of the properties, yes.
Is there a reason why? Is this the only answer?
This would be the lowest cost.
Somebody
option
comes
for
with
the
a dump
village.
truck of cash, we have to borrow it. I
Right.
mean, there's
I-
really no other option.
So are you concerned about our borrowing capacity at all? I'm
Not with-
asking his
I mean, not with
opinion.
What I know that's on the horizon, I'm not, but
Okay.
I'm not in every discussion about
Right.
what's pending. But as it stands right now, I'm not, no.
Yeah, but that was the last table. It shows our analysis
Right.
of the financing.
But- Right.
We're in a good spot.
But it's up. I just asked his opinion. Well, it seemed that those were my main questions.
Okay. One of the questions I had was, let's say just as an example here, the Grossnick property sells this year for $1 million for a round number. We take that money and we can pay back these notes? Is that,
You could put it into a debt service fund to help pay down the payments as they come due, yes.
got it?
Mhm. And that's true for, any of these properties. If for some reason, or if the village board decides, we're getting out of the land business, we're going to sell them, we would hold that money aside to pay down the debt service. So there's, less impact to the taxpayer.
Okay, great, thank you.
And we're not penalized by doing that?
We
No.
couldn't pay it down early. We would just use that money to make the annual payments.
Until the call date, then you could pay down the debt.
Okay. So you gotta leave, you're obligated to leave it open for the 20.
What's that?
You're obligated to leave it open for the
Yes.
20. Right.
Until the call date, you are, yes.
Thank you.
Which would likely be about 8 to 9 year call date on this 20-year issue.
Okay, it's not a 20-year.
No.
It's going to call earlier than
It's
that.
gonna call, usually we set the call, probably about year 9 of the issue would be the call date.
Got it.
Typically.
Terry, do you have questions?
Just a comment, again, a great presentation. I mean, it's hard to come up with questions after something this detailed. This is something we clearly have to do. And that's the end of the story for me. Totally support it.
All right, we have a motion on table to approve or I guess move it forward to the village board with a positive recommendation to authorize the issuance of the sale of a bond not to exceed $9.98 million, taxable bond series 2025A. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 2-1 with a positive recommendation to the board. All right, with that, we'll move on to item B, resolution authorizing the issuance and sale of not to exceed $4,165,000 general obligation promissory note series 2025B.
Make a motion to approve as presented.
I'll second. With that, now we can entertain questions on this, but
No.
before that, I want to ask my questions. So,
Sure.
number one, I believe all of the items that were listed here were part of our budget last year and were approved by the village board.
Correct. The only one I would say was not part of the budget, and maybe warrants more discussion, was the police department fire building.
Yeah.
There's planning to be more discussion on that tonight at public safety regarding the status of that project from the administrator. The reason we included it on this 2025 issuance is this is essentially the one time we're borrowing here in 2025. If the board was going to, move to make any actions on that project, over the next 12 months, now would be the time to borrow for it, or wait until we borrow next year around the same time.
Okay. And us, general government and finance, just doing a recommendation tonight, we could move that discussion up before we do the bond issuance or the vote on it tonight at the village board meeting, and we could discuss that at that point.
Correct. Other than that, everything here was part of the 2025 budget. As relates to 2025 road program, that does not include Division Road. That is just part of the annual road program. Towards the bottom, or I guess the bottom of the 2025 GO notes, the non-taxable notes, there is about $500,000 for Division Road preparation and design.
Okay.
Can you
Committee,
flip
any
the,
questions?
Can you flip the screen to the chart?
It'd be table 3. Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
Thank you. So can we pull items by line?
You can. I'd rather do it at village board.
Oh. Okay. And I thought the Division Road prep was lower because we were doing some of our own engineering.
The engineering department certainly is doing work on the Division Road and design. This includes portions for design, and then, if there's any right-of-way work. This was a number provided by the engineering department of what they think they will need over the next 12 months related to that project, whether it be design or a little bit more than that. Again, what we're doing is we're trying to have enough cash flow over the next 12 months for the project until we borrow again in 2026.
Any other discussion?
And was the public safety building on the ARPA fund at one time?
There was, I believe, about $65,000. That was more for public input. Was the ARPA dollars allocated to public input on, what they wanted it to look like, where it would be, things like that.
All right, any other discussion? Not all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. With that, we'll end this general government and finance special meeting at 6:20, and the next one up is the public safety. Give us just a couple minutes to reset. Thank you.